I felt every muscle in my back scream in protest when I dropped my backpack on the apartment floor. 6 sets of deadlifts do that to anyone. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the pain as I dragged myself to the living room sofa. "Looks like someone got run over by a truck," Derek commented, appearing in the kitchen doorway with a beer in his hand and that ironic smile that had been with me for 8 months of living together. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. 8 months of sharing the same roof since I lost my old apartment. 8 months of watching Derek walk around the house shirtless, showing off those broad swimmer's shoulders that made my stomach do flips. 8 months of holding back thoughts that friends shouldn't have about each other. "Jim," I murmured, turning my face away to hide the grimace as I tried to get comfortable on the sofa. "I think I overdid it a bit." Derek came over with that calm typical of his 29 years, 6 more than mine, and sat down in the armchair in front of me. "Jason, you need to learn to respect your limits. Is that trainer of yours trying to kill you?" I laughed, even though the movement sent another wave of pain through my shoulders. "No, it's my fault. I wanted to impress by increasing the weight." "Impress who?" Derek raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of his beer. I looked away. That was a question I'd rather not answer. "Turn over," he suddenly ordered, placing the beer on the coffee table. "What?" "You're all tense. Remember I worked at that spa in my last year of college? I can help with that." My heart raced instantly. "No need, man. It'll pass. Stop being stubborn. It's just a massage." Derek was already standing, rolling up the sleeves of his gray t-shirt that made his eyes stand out. "It'll help, I promise." I hesitated for a few seconds, but the pain in my back was more convincing than my common sense. I slowly turned over, lying on my stomach on the sofa as Derek positioned himself next to me. "Take your t-shirt off," he suggested casually. "It works better that way." I obeyed reluctantly, ignoring the alarms ringing in my head. The first touch of his hands on my bare back made me hold my breath. "Relax," Derek murmured, pressing his thumbs between my shoulder blades. "You're too tense," and I tried to focus on the muscle pain and not the warmth of his hands running along my skin. His fingers worked with precision, finding every knot of tension and methodically undoing them. "Wow, you're really good at this," I commented, trying to keep the conversation normal while fighting sensations that were anything but friendly. "I have my hidden talents," he replied, with a low laugh that sent shivers down my spine, completely unconnected with the massage. Soon, the pain began to fade, replaced by a dangerously relaxing sensation. His hands moved down my lower back, pausing occasionally on sensitive spots. I closed my eyes, torn between physical relief and mental torment. "Better?" Derek asked, his voice strangely close to my ear. I opened my eyes and turned my face, not expecting to find him so near. Our gazes met just inches apart. Something had changed in the air between us. It became dense, charged. Yeah," I answered, my voice a bit huskier than usual. "Way better." His hands didn't stop. They continued drawing lines on my skin, but the touch was no longer therapeutic. There was a silent question in every movement. "Jason," he murmured, hesitating. The sound of the intercom cut the moment like a knife. Derek stepped back abruptly to answer it. It was the delivery guy with the food we had ordered earlier and completely forgotten. During dinner, we tried to act normally, chatting about work, about the new Marvel movie, about anything except what had almost happened on the sofa. But there was a palpable tension in the air, an elephant in the room that neither of us dared to name. Later that night, when we said goodnight, Derek paused in the hallway between our rooms. "About the massage," he began. "It was great," I quickly interrupted. "My back feels so much better." "Thanks." He nodded, his gaze uncertain. "If you need another one, just ask." At that moment, I realized we were on the edge of something dangerous, a cliff we had been avoiding since I started living here. The question was, which one of us would have the courage to take the first step? 3 nights later, the tension between us had turned into something almost tangible. Every time we crossed paths in the kitchen, every good morning murmured before coffee, every casual goodbye, everything carried a new weight, an unspoken expectation. That Thursday, I got home exhausted after a particularly stressful meeting. I found Derek in the living room, focused on his laptop, working on one of the many design projects he did as a freelancer. He looked up as I entered, his gray eyes assessing my tired expression. Rough day? I collapsed on the sofa next to him, loosening my tie. The client changed the briefing for the third time this week. I'm beat. Derek closed his laptop and set it on the coffee table. Want a beer? I want to be unconscious for a week, I replied, closing my eyes and letting my head fall back. I heard his low laugh, followed by the sound of his footsteps heading into the kitchen. When he returned, he wasn't just carrying a beer, he also had a bottle of red wine. I thought the occasion called for something stronger than beer, he explained, as he grabbed 2 glasses from the living room cabinet. That Malbec we bought last month. I watched as he poured the wine with the precision of someone who'd worked in restaurants. Derek had that quality. He did everything with a natural confidence I always admired, and maybe even envied. You never told me what happened at the meeting with your ex last week, I commented, accepting the glass he offered me. Derek settled on the sofa, closer than usual. It wasn't a big deal. She wanted to return some things I left at her place. Only that? He shrugged, taking a sip of wine. She suggested maybe we could try again, but I didn't feel anything. I think it really ended. I nodded, trying to ignore the wave of relief that rushed over me. Their relationship had lasted 8 months and ended shortly before I moved in here. I never admitted to anyone how happy I was about that breakup. And you? Derek suddenly asked. It's been nearly a year since I've seen you with anyone. The wine burned going down my throat. I haven't met anyone interesting. In a city of almost 1 million people? Hard to believe. His tone was light, but there was intensity in his gaze. Maybe I've just gotten more selective, I replied, sustaining his look. Derek smiled, a different smile than usual, less confident, more vulnerable. So what exactly are you looking for, Jason? My heart raced. It was now or never. Someone who can give a really good back massage would be a start. The answer hung between us like a confession. Derek set his glass on the coffee table, his eyes never leaving mine. That can be arranged. The silence that followed was deafening. I realized I had stopped breathing and forced air into my lungs. The glass in my hand trembled slightly. Actually, I continued, gathering all my courage, I can't stop thinking about that massage. Derek came closer, so near I could feel the heat radiating from him. Me neither. When his fingers touched my face, there were no more excuses or pretenses between us. 8 months of repressed tension melted in an instant. His lips met mine urgently, as if he were afraid I'd change my mind. I let the glass fall on the rug, spilling red wine into a stain that neither of us cared to notice. My hands found his neck, his nape, his short hair. Each touch revealed a new sensitive spot, a new discovery. Come on, Derek murmured against my lips, standing up and holding out his hand. I followed him to his bedroom, a familiar territory yet completely new in this context. The perfectly made bed, Derek was always organized, waited like a silent witness. You sure about this? He asked, his voice lower than usual. In response, I pulled him toward me, reigniting the kiss we began in the living room. His hand slipped under my shirt, exploring every inch of the skin he had massaged days before, but now with a completely different intention. I want to see you, he whispered, as he skillfully unbuttoned my shirt. The last bit of hesitation vanished when his hands roamed over my exposed chest. I returned the gesture, pulling his t-shirt up. Seeing his bare torso wasn't new. We'd shared an apartment long enough, but being able to touch him, feeling every defined muscle under my fingers, was a revelation. He led me to the bed and gently laid me down. Turn over, he requested, echoing that first massage. I complied, feeling the mattress sink as he positioned himself on top of me. His hands began on my shoulders, but now there was no therapeutic pretext. Every movement was deliberately sensual, moving down my spine, sending shivers that spread like waves. I've always wanted to do this, he confessed, his lips brushing against my nape. Ever since that first week you moved in. I turned to face him, surprised. "Why'd you never say anything?" "Because I was scared," he admitted, his eyes scanning my face as if memorizing every detail. "Scared of ruining our friendship. Scared you wouldn't feel the same." I pulled him in for another, slower kiss, savoring the moment. "I was scared too," I confessed against his lips. "Scared of imagining things, of risking losing you as a friend, as—" "Shh," he interrupted, placing a finger over my lips. "Enough with the fear." The rest of the night melted into sensations. His hands and lips mapped my body like unexplored territory. I discovered sensitive places I didn't even know existed. When our bodies finally came together completely, it was like finding a secret language understood only by us. The rhythm between us grew gradually, like a wave building on the horizon, gaining strength and height before breaking. His hands held mine, fingers interlaced pressed against the pillow. Our gazes stayed locked, sharing an intimacy that went far beyond the physical. "Jason," he moaned, his body arching over mine. The intensity in his eyes pushed me to the limit. The world seemed to shatter into 1,000 pieces, only to come back together, transformed. I felt his body trembling against mine as we shared that moment of absolute ecstasy. Later, lying side by side, breathless and in awe, the silence came back. But this time it was comfortable, complicit. Derek traced lazy patterns on my chest with his fingers as I played with a lock of his hair. "What are you thinking about?" I finally asked, watching his profile in the dim light of the room. "About how it took so long," he replied, turning to look at me. "About how many nights I stayed awake listening to you move in the room next door, imagining what it would be like if we had been brave sooner," I finished. He nodded, a small smile slowly forming. The waiting was worth it, though. I laughed quietly, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Definitely." Derek rested his elbow on the table, suddenly looking at me seriously. "This changes everything, you know." "I know," I replied, feeling a tightening in my chest. "Are you scared?" "Not of what happened," he quickly clarified, "but of what comes next. And you?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But for the first time, it's a good kind of fear. Like that feeling before you jump out of a plane." Derek smiled, leaning in for a soft kiss. "Just remind me never to take you skydiving. I don't want any competition." We fell asleep wrapped in each other, as natural as it could possibly be. For the first time since moving into the apartment, there was no invisible barrier between us, no carefully casual conversations, no constant effort to maintain a safe distance. I woke up before him the next morning, watching how the early sunlight played on his face, relaxed from sleep. A feeling of vulnerability washed over me. We had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how to move forward from here. I got up quietly, wearing only my boxers, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. As the coffee maker worked, I leaned on the counter, trying to collect my thoughts. I didn't regret what had happened. How could I? But the reality of the next morning brought complications that the passion of the previous night had temporarily erased. And what if he considered it all a mistake? What if our dynamic at home became unbearably awkward? Even worse, what if he wanted more, and I discovered it wasn't what I expected? "I can hear you thinking in there." I jumped at the sound of his voice. Derek was standing in the kitchen doorway, wearing nothing but his sweatpants, which hung dangerously low on his hips. His hair was a mess, and there were pillow marks on his face. I'd never found him so attractive. "Sorry," I murmured. "I didn't mean to wake you." He stepped closer, stopping just a few inches from me. "You disappeared from the bed. I came to make coffee. And to panic," he added with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. I looked away. "I'm not panicking." "Jason." His voice was serious now. "Look at me." Reluctantly, I met his gaze. What I saw surprised me. Not the usual confidence, but vulnerability, uncertainty. "If you're regretting it," he began, "we can—" "No," I cut him off quickly. I don't regret it. I'm just processing. Derek nodded slowly. Me too. It's a lot to take in. We stayed silent for a moment, the only sound the bubbling of the coffee maker. There was a strangeness between us that hadn't existed the night before, an acute awareness of the uncharted territory we had entered. So what happens now? I finally asked. Derek stepped forward, closing the distance between us. His hands found my waist, hesitant at first, then more sure. I don't really know, he admitted, but I know I don't want to go back to what we were before. I felt something inside me relax at his words. Neither do I. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his whole face. Well, I guess that's a start. His lips met mine, different from the urgency of the night before. This kiss was a question, a beginning, a promise. When we pulled apart, I saw in his eyes the same mix of hope and fear I knew was reflected in mine. We didn't have all the answers, nor did we know where this new path might lead. But for the first time, the uncertainty didn't seem frightening. It seemed like an adventure starting with a simple request for a massage. The following weeks flowed into a new routine, both familiar and strangely different. We shared the same space, but now without the invisible boundaries we'd previously established. Nights were spent in the same bedroom, usually his since he had a bigger bed. Our bodies quickly learned each other's language, as if they had been waiting for this moment all their lives. During the day, though, reality set in. Derek continued with his design projects, and I kept up with my job at the marketing agency. We tried to maintain an appearance of normality when we went out with mutual friends, although the looks we exchanged over beer bottles definitely didn't go unnoticed. It was on a Thursday, almost a month after our first night together, that the bubble burst. I got home from work early, excited to surprise him. I found Derek sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone with an expression I couldn't quite figure out. "Hey!" I called out, setting my briefcase on the counter. "Everything okay?" He looked up, and I immediately sensed that something was off. There was a distance in his eyes that I hadn't seen in weeks. "I got an offer," he finally said, placing his phone on the table. "That design firm in San Francisco. They want me to lead an important project." I felt something heavy settling in my stomach. San Francisco? For how long? That's the thing. Derek ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as a sign of nervousness. It's not temporary. It's a permanent position. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the air thin. "And you're thinking of accepting," I stated, rather than asking. "It's the opportunity I've always dreamed of, Jason. The kind of work I've wanted to do since college." I nodded mechanically, trying to process it. San Francisco was over 3,000 kilometers away. When do they need an answer? Monday. 4 days. 4 days to decide the future of something that had barely begun. "Did you know about this before us?" I left the question hanging. Derek shook his head quickly. "No. I sent them my portfolio months ago, long before we never thought they'd actually call me." An uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. Part of me wanted to yell, to beg him to stay, to say that what we had built was worth more than any professional opportunity. But the rational side knew I had no right to that. "You should go," I finally said, surprising even myself. "It's your dream." Derek looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "And what about us?" That simple question carried the weight of the world. The us that we hadn't fully defined, that was still under construction, fragile and new. "We can try a long-distance thing," I suggested, knowing how hard it would be. "We won't be the first couple to make it work." "Couple," he repeated the word with a sad smile. "Is that what we are now?" "I don't know what we are," I admitted. "I just know I don't want to be the reason you give up something important." Derek stood up and walked around the table to stand right in front of me. "What if you're the more important one?" My heart raced at his words, but I kept my composure. "You can't base that decision on this," I gestured between us. "It's only been a month, Derek. We don't know where this is going." He recoiled as if I had hit him. "So, to you, is it just this? A fleeting thing?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" His voice got louder now. because it feels like you're pushing me away on the first test we face. The accusation hurt more than I had expected. I'm being realistic. You have an incredible opportunity, and we've only been together for such a short time. Time means nothing, he interrupted. Feelings don't follow a schedule, Jason. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. Derek folded his arms. Either we feel something strong enough to fight for it, or we don't. The conversation was quickly spiraling out of my control. It isn't fair to put this kind of pressure on me. This is your decision. And I'm asking for your opinion, not as my roommate or friend, but as someone who shares my bed, my life. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I want you to tell me to stay, Jason. Just that. I looked at him, torn between the selfish desire to fulfill his request and the fear of taking on that responsibility. I can't do that. Derek nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. I guess that answers my question then. Before I could say more, he grabbed his keys and left the apartment, leaving me alone with the weight of unspoken words. I spent the night sleepless, lying in my own bed for the first time in weeks. The familiar ceiling now seemed strange, as if it belonged to a past life. Derek didn't come back, and I didn't have the courage to call him. Every minute that passed widened the gap between us. The next morning, when I finally heard the front door open, I jumped out of bed. I found him in the living room with deep bags under his eyes and an exhausted expression. "Where did you spend the night?" I asked, even though I had no right to demand an explanation. "At Mike's place," he replied, referring to a mutual friend. I needed to think. I nodded, unsure how to proceed. The silence between us had never been so heavy. "I think I'm going to take the offer," he said finally. Something inside me broke, even though I had pushed him toward it. "I understand." "No, you don't understand." Derek sighed, running a hand over his face in a tired gesture. "I stayed up all night thinking about us, about San Francisco, about everything. And I realized you're right. We haven't been together long enough. There are no guarantees. It'd be irresponsible to turn down this opportunity just because of something so new." His words were exactly what I had said, but hearing them back hurt far more than I imagined. "When are you leaving?" That was all I managed to ask. "In 2 weeks. They want me to start as soon as possible." 2 weeks, 14 days. That was all we had left now. The following days passed in a strange limbo. We continued sharing the bed, making love with a desperate urgency, as if trying to store enough memories to last an eternity. We didn't talk about the future, about video calls or the occasional visit. Every attempt to bring up the subject ended in kisses that silenced the difficult questions. I helped him pack his belongings, watching as the apartment seemed emptier with every closed box. Everyday items that I had gotten used to seeing disappeared into cardboard packages, taking along pieces of the life we had built together. On the eve of his departure, we made a simple dinner. We talked about trivial things, avoiding the elephant in the room. Then, in bed, we made love as if it were both the first and the last time. Slow, intense, memorizing every detail of each other. "I don't want this to be goodbye," he whispered against my neck, our breath still heavy. "It's not," I replied, trying to believe my own words. The silence that followed said everything we didn't have the courage to express. We both knew the grim statistics of long-distance relationships, especially ones as new as ours. "No," I interrupted, placing my fingers on his lips. "Don't say that now. Not like this." Derek nodded, understanding. Some words, once said, would add even more weight to our impending separation. The next morning, the taxi that was to take him to the airport arrived punctually at 8 a.m. I watched from the window as the driver helped load his bags. When there was no more delaying an inevitable goodbye, Derek turned to me. "I guess that's it," he said, trying to sound casual. "I guess so." We stared at each other for a long moment, the past and present condensed in that instant. "Can I ask you something?" he suddenly said. "Sure." "Don't come with me to the airport. I can't stand the idea of leaving you there." I nodded, feeling both relieved and devastated at the same time. Goodbyes at airports were cinematic cliches I'd rather avoid. Derek stepped forward, cupping my face in his hands. The kiss we shared tasted of promises, regrets, and unrealized possibilities. "This wasn't just a massage for me," he murmured against my lips. "It never was." Before I could respond, he pulled away, taking the last backpack. At the door, he hesitated for a moment, but did not look back before leaving. The sound of the door closing echoed through the now semi-empty apartment. I leaned against the wall, letting my body slide to the floor. The silence was deafening. That night, lying alone in my bed, I replayed every moment of the past few months. The day I moved in here, nervous and uncertain. The first time I noticed how Derek's eyes changed color with the light. The massage that started it all. I picked up my phone, staring at the screen. Derek had landed in San Francisco hours ago, but there was still no message from him. I opened our message history, typed several messages, and then deleted them all. What could I say? That I was a coward? That I let him go because I was too afraid to ask him to stay? That now, alone in the apartment we shared, I finally realized what I had thrown away? I closed my eyes, recalling his final words. This wasn't just a massage for me. And it wasn't for me either. It was the beginning of something that could have been extraordinary. Something that, out of fear or insecurity, I let slip through my fingers like water. 3 days later, I finally found the courage. Not for a message, but for something more significant. I booked a ticket to San Francisco for the upcoming weekend. I didn't know if Derek would accept me, if he hadn't already moved on with his new life. But I knew I had to try. Because some stories don't end with a goodbye at the door. Some stories are just the first chapter of something bigger. And maybe, just maybe, ours could be one of them. While packing my own hopes into a suitcase, I prepared to ask the real question I should have asked weeks ago. Will you give me a chance? Only time would tell if Derek was still willing to say yes. If this story touched you in any way, if you've ever had to make tough decisions for love or your career, hit like and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments an experience where a seemingly simple moment completely changed the course of your life. Sometimes it's the most unexpected touches that leave the deepest marks.